Good evening, I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole. Our big story tonight is all about Kenya's key water towers that are drained courtesy of climate change and human activities downstream. Illegal logging and charcoal making in Kenya's forests are to blame for a huge percentage of the environmental degradation. While Deputy President William Ruto has banned logging for 3 months, the effects of forest depletion are far-reaching, with stakeholders fearing that some parts of this country, which were formerly rich, are slowly turning into arid and semi-arid areas. Now, there's hunger and thirst, and certainly this is a topic that we are tackling tonight. Over the past 5 years, Kenya's forest cover has improved by only 5%, but it still falls far below Kenya's minimum target of 10%. So how have we managed our natural resources like water and forests? And just how much policy has been overcome by politics? We are discussing that tonight on the show. That continues to be our focus. I will introduce my guest to you. I want you to just take a look at some of those statistics of Kenya's forest cover and how it has been doing over the last few years. Now, according to the World Bank, the forest area in Kenya was reported at 7.754% in 2015, and that was a drop from 8.3% in 1990. And the year 2000 was our lowest, was actually our worst. We marked the lowest percentage of forest cover in Kenya at 6.25%. Now, get this in terms of numbers. Between 1990 and the year 2005, Kenya lost an average of 12,600 hectares per year of forest cover, and this was due to human settlement and illegal logging during those 15 years. And the government, through the Kenya Forest Service, has put over 400,000 hectares in degraded public land under forestry. So, where are we? As we said, Kenya's forest cover has now increased by just 5% in the last 4 years. And remember, we are short of achieving that 10% forest cover by 2020. And this is actually something that is enshrined in Kenya's constitution. That is Article 69 that states, and I quote, "The state shall work to achieve and maintain a tree cover of at least 10% of the land area of Kenya." So that is where we are at this moment in time. So let me introduce my panel to you tonight. Joining us on the program is an environmentalist who's the chair of the Green Africa Foundation, Dr. Isaac Kalua. I should also mention tonight that he has been appointed to that task force that will be reporting back to the Cabinet Secretary in charge in the next 14 days. Also with us tonight is environmental lawyer Benson Ochieng. We shall also be speaking to Mercy Karubitu, who is a senior program officer at the Green Belt Movement. She will be joining us on phone here on the show. Tonight, as always, our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna, is on standby with the progress we have made so far in matters regarding environmental conservation. Sophia?
Good evening, Yvonne. Environment conservation becoming a serious topic of concern in Kenya, with degradation taking effect at a very fast rate in the country, and we've seen several developments to this end. So we have that ban that the Deputy President announced on logging on all public and community lands for the next 3 months, and then the Environment CS went on ahead to name that task force, 15-member task force that's in the next 14 days must produce and deliver a report that will be giving an assessment of the forests in Kenya. Where do we stand? What are the issues at hand? And also recommendations. But speaking to various environmentalists who have been studying and have done various studies looking into what are the issues in the forest and our environment, is that you look at such a task force being given 14 days, the issues ailing, say for instance, our forests are far-reaching, and whilst the organizations are constantly tracking the progress, you'd imagine such a task force would want to go ahead and collect its own information, because we have water towers, some of which you were just talking about there, the Mao Tower Complex, you have the Mount Kenya, the Elgon, as well, Mount Elgon, the Aberdares, and just the Mao Water complex in and of itself. There are 6 to 7 forests in there. So the question that begs, even with this task force being put in place, and it would be interesting to hear from the official from this task force, is do they think they will be able to come up with any meaningful study of really what ails the entire country? Because some of the lecturers that are experts in this area and have studied a lot and extensively on the same, talk about mismanagement being one of the biggest issues that ails the question of our water towers, and which has in fact even led us to the drought that the country is facing. Yvonne, 3 million Kenyans currently being affected by drought in the country. And remember, this was listed by the president last year, February, as a national disaster. So for the last 1 year, it just keeps getting worse. And the first signs of this drought, again, being noticed in 2016. So all of this time, things have not been able to lift up. You have several counties, all of these people being affected, and now 3.8 billion shillings has been put in by the government to help deal with the ravages of drought affecting Kenyans. And once again, you have the Kenya Red Cross coming out with appeals to raise money against help these Kenyans being affected, Yvonne. So at the root of all of this is the mismanagement around the water towers, the human settlement, the logging, the deforestation that has been witnessed. And one can see efforts like what we are seeing, this, the governor, Kitui County, Charity Ngilu, the backlash she's receiving of the ban there of charcoal burning, a huge backlash from those who are hugely benefiting from the same. So that this is a conversation, Yvonne, that should be happening at many levels, is what some of these lecturers and students of matters environment will tell you, that it's other than the policy level and those that will be able to look at what needs to be done at the basic mwananchi level, grassroots level, to empower people to understand that some of these practices they get involved in and engage with, even engage in, even for profit, at the end of the day will come back to bite them. Talking about water, Warma, the body that deals with the same, is talking about Kenya having a deficit of 40%, Yvonne, as we stand. And that is going to get worse if these water towers, which currently most of them are suffering, the rivers are drying up, if nothing is done, then those numbers will continue to even get worse with time. So that as Kenya stands right now facing drought, the water towers not doing well, you have this 90-day ban. But what happens after 90 days? Do we go back to those same practices that brought us here in the first place? And then you remember last year, Yvonne, the CS then, Wahungu, talked about an increase of 5% in the forest cover, 5.3% in fact. She mentioned that had happened in the last 4 years. And what had happened is that between 1990 and the year 2005, over 15 years, Kenya had lost 5% forest cover. So that even 15 years, we lost forest cover of 5%. And then in 4 years, we've gained 5.3%. Wouldn't things be getting better? One would imagine they would. But then what we understand from scholars is that these numbers usually would be put out by government officials to just paint a picture of we are doing good, we are doing better. But in actual fact, to get down and to look at the real actual situations paint a complete different, terrifying picture. And that is why even this team that is going to be conducting this study and task force for the next 14 days, one wonders, will they just be picking these figures that have been thrown around in the past several years and various studies that have been done, or will they actually go to the grassroots and the ground themselves and look at the actual situation and paint a picture that will enable Kenya, how officials, how people be able to put in place measures that can actually get Kenya on the right track? Because at the end of the day, climate change is a reality around the world. and the same effects continue to be felt. I remember, as I hand it back to you, Yvonne, growing up, we had a huge forest near where my grandma lives. Now going to visit her, it's all gone. And on Twitter, social media, people have been sharing examples of just, there used to be this forest, there's a lot happening. And we're doing it with wanton abandon, but at the end of the day, Kenyans, the leadership must realize it will all come back to bite us, and especially for generations to come. Yvonne.
Yes, that's right, Sophia. And Dr. Wangari Maathai put it very well when she spoke about how we treat the environment and then what happens in return. Mother Nature isn't so kind when we fail to look after her. Sophia Wanuna, thank you very much for that extensive report and helping us understand some of the issues that befall the country at this point and how that is linked to our dwindling forest cover. An important question you raised about the time period that has been given to this task force that was appointed by the Cabinet Secretary Keriako Tobiko. We'll be getting into that with Dr. Isaac Kalua, who is a member of that task force in just a moment. Now, Kenyans will continue to require timber for construction for many years to come, perhaps even for decades. But there's also a very spirited fight to raise the percentage of forests. Which side between the logging business and the conservation efforts will subdue the other? Here is a report filed by Raquel Muigai on the slow but sure death of the Mount Kenya forest.
Time battle to protect the dwindling forest cover in the country. Despite campaigns and community sensitization, the battle of the forest is yet to be won. A once dense and lush green Mount Kenya forest is now the latest victim of deforestation. Tree stumps, felled trees and the bursting sound of the pawasu are what characterizes the natural forest. However, there are two sides of the same coin.
When you are pre-qualified sawmiller, you can tender the material in any forest as per the plan. When a plantation is earmarked for clear fell, the sawmillers come in, pay for the material. We normally give them 30 days to remove, or 45 days if the plantation is big.
Sawmillers have always been granted licenses to cut down trees in plantation forests, characterized by monocultured alien trees that are purposely planted for timber production. But there is a process on how plantation forests are managed to ensure continuous availability of trees to be felled.
After removing, we seek authority from the Chief Conservator of Forest for the community to come in and start cultivation.
Lakini haipadwi catch crop. Ile inasemekana isipadwe catch crop. Kwa hivyo hatupadi catch crop. Ikipadwa baada ya season moja ndio mchaga iwe mzuri. Season ya pili tunapada miti sababu mchaga ni mzuri. Tukipada hiyo miti inapaswa iwe 80%, over 80%.
Farming within such plantations is to ensure that the soil is ready for another cycle of new trees, but with the replanting of trees being parallel to the rising demand for timber, unsupervised hungry sawmillers opt to dig deep into the natural forest, cutting the indigenous trees to meet their demands.
Vile miti inakatwa, tunaona kama hii itakuwa desert. Na hiyo maneno haitufurahishi sisi. Na tunaona sio mzuri. Kama serikali ingetusaidia hiyo maneno kwanza isimame ama ishe, hata sisi wakaaji wa Kabalu tunaweza furahi.
Hawa watu wameharibu kichaka, wamekata miti hata ile michaga. Hata mkienda hapa pande za juu karibu na Dadhi Secondary mtaona vile imekatwa.
According to environmental conservationist Peter Ikuo, however, this cycle of clearing the natural forest cover due to the demand for timber can only be solved if the country gets to adopt new construction codes.
In construction, the sawn timber is of much use. We are still relying on very old technology, standards, building standards, which does not allow us to use and process the wood. So there is so much demand for the sawn timber. But if we can use an alternative, like the unsawn timber, to do particularly like roofing, we can bring down seriously the demand for sawn timber.
When a tree is ready for harvesting and has been felled, the trunk is usually debranched and cut into butt log, middle log, top log, and 1 to 3 sections of pulp wood. It is after this that the sawmillers will process the timber into blocks suitable for roofing constructions.
In a sawn timber, it means you need a tree which is not less than 10, 12 years for you to get a plank of about 4 by 3, because that is what is required to do the truss work. But a similar unsawn timber of diameter 4 or 6 inches, this one can be grown in about 6 or 5 years. It will have been grown and it's enough. Structure-wise, it is even better. Structure-wise, it's even better than the sawn timber.
The Kenya construction regulations do not have provision for use of unprocessed timber or roundwood like the bamboo for construction. This kind of timber, Ekua says, will drive the need for sawmillers to venture into the forest, as such wood will be readily available due to their small size.
Bamboo could be the finest tree on the planet. Number one, in a 4 years' time, you are going to have grown bamboo. Number two, it is light in weight. Number three, it absorbs more carbon than any other tree. When you cut it, you have requested it to grow more and more aggressively.
However, whether or not the law surrounding sawn timber for construction is amended, the commitment from the Kenya Forest Service in ensuring that trees to be felled are available is also leaving a lot to be desired.
Lakini unajua ile haijapewana nini na serikali unakuta inabeba usiku. Sasa unajua saa kama authority ni wao tu, sasa utaenda kuongea, sasa utaongea na nani? Na ni hao tu. Sasa ukienda unakuta huyu ameungana na huyo na huyo. Sasa hata ukiongea hii inaishia tu hapa.
Their desire for housing, especially on the lower end of the spectrum, persists. And with the management of plantation forests recording a worrying trend, natural forests will soon be a tale. The Mount Kenya forest being the latest victim of the timber cutting spree. Raquel Muigai, KT News in Nyeri County.
All right, so let's get into that conversation now with my guests tonight. We have Benson Ocheng, who's an environmental lawyer, joining us tonight. Later on, we'll be speaking to Mercy Karubitu from the Greenbelt Movement. But also joining us tonight is Dr. Isaac Kalua, who's the chair of the Kenya Water Towers Agency, he's the chair of the Green Africa Foundation. And more importantly tonight, he's a member of the Rapid Results Task Force on Forestry Management that has been appointed by the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Environment and Natural Resources, Keriako Tobiko. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the big story tonight. Benson, I'd like to begin with you. So here we are with yet another logging ban. This is certainly not the first. The most recent one being in 2015, December, just 3 years ago. It was a 60-day ban, lifted 60 days later. How effective is this ban? And, you know, what's supposed to happen during the 90 days and thereafter?
Thanks a lot, Yvonne. It's a pleasure to be here. I think we've had our own game of musical chairs regarding how we want to manage our forests. And particularly, the issue of forest ban is one that we've never had right or certain in this country. Because for a long time, about 3 or so years ago, the issue was whether we had a forest ban in place or not. And then, of course, we came to the point where we talked of 60-day ban, and today we are talking of a 90-day ban on forests. So it is something that has been done from an executive point of view in an ad hoc way. I don't know really where it fits within the larger scheme of management of forests. But to be honest, one can say, yes, a step in the good direction, but yet again, part of the big game of musical chairs that we have in this country with respect to managing our resources, not least the forest resources that we are talking about today.
Okay, Dr. Kalua, do you think it's a game of musical chairs, as Benson puts it? I recall a logging ban during President Moi's administration. I'm not sure I recall whether that ban was ever lifted. But has logging bans in this country, have they affected positively in any way our reforestation plans?
I think the most important thing right now at this point in time, I believe, because of the goodwill and the effect that is so negative to the environment, we should count from where we are today, and I believe this must be real. And allow me also to make a correction on 2 areas, or rather just clarify. Our country's forest cover has never been at 1.7 or 1.6 as previously related. And this is something that many Kenyans may not have known. When we talk about forest cover, we talk only about the area that is gazetted as forest in this country, which is a total of 2%. This is the area that Kenya Forest Service is mandated to work within. And therefore, the 1.7 has only and always been part of the forests that has been available. Therefore, it was the first time when the organization that I'm part of presented the national forest cover, or the national tree cover, at which was reported at 7.1%, that is in 2014, and thereafter there was an area of the mangroves that had been left out, and thereafter then the KFS, of course, brought in the updated figure of 7.2%. And therefore, this is something that as Kenyans we need to understand. And therefore, logging and banning of logging is something that we just need to understand. It is the resolve. It is the willpower. It is political commitment that will drive us as a nation, because we understand where we are.
All right. So how bad is it that we get to this point? I mean, with previous bans, we've seen, I mean, the country was at a critical point in time during President Moi's administration. There was a severe drought, there was water shortage, electricity rationing as well. And the same thing in 2014. So in your understanding, where is our forest cover now that necessitates this immediate ban on logging?
I think every Kenyan can feel the pinch in terms of water that is available, and I believe the action to ban the logging is something that is definitely timely. The fact that the minister also has appointed a committee to deal with this subject, which I'm proud to be part of, but you will allow me, Yvonne, not to speak about it, because it is only wise not to, because I've just been appointed, and I thank the minister for having me, together with our very able chairperson, and therefore I'll try to restrict myself to matters of Kenya Water Towers and the recent report that we gave. Unknown to many Kenyans, the situation is really bad. And the situation is that we lack ownership. We do not pick it up to own the process. I mean, you have no water residents in Nairobi. We have just seen today people in Lamu are complaining that they don't have water. People are going for water in far distant places. And therefore, this is the end issue that we must deal with. Why are we not having water? And I think it is terrible. I mean, when you talk about forest fires, it is bad, more than what Kenyans may be able to know. And I think we are at a situation in the country now that we have to face facts as they are, deal with the issues without having to sugarcoat issues. And I think this is the best thing that has ever happened to Kenya. It has never been this bad at this kind of a time, when we can feel it either in our pockets, in our lives, in our livelihoods. It is just too bad. And
okay. All right. I want us to take a short break. But Benson, let me ask you this before we do that, because you're the environmental lawyer with us today. So if we got here as a result of uncontrolled logging or unlicensed logging, why have we not seen, or has this happened and we've just not been following this issue closely? Wouldn't it then just be easy to take disciplinary measures against foresters who are in charge, to haul of these illegal loggers into court and, you know, jail them?
To be honest, Yvonne, we didn't get here overnight. This has been a process. And I think it falls within the larger schemes of failures that as a country, we must admit that we are responsible for in terms of managing our forests and in terms of managing our natural resources. We didn't wake up and find that there was no water. This is the one country where we have had leaders say in broad daylight, tell constituents that they know for a fact that rain does not come from the forest, it comes from above. And overnight, then we turn around and say we have political goodwill and commitment and all these sorts of things. But remember also, there is a scheme for licensing logging in this country. So there is a forest authority or a service that is responsible for these facts, paid by the taxpayers, and a whole institution that is set up for that purpose. So I hope that we will be wiser going forward, but definitely we have to accept that the rain started beating us a long time ago, and we have to retrace our steps, because we are not going to simply assume that we are going to deal with a problem if we don't understand its root causes, and if we don't appreciate the systemic failures that are the product of this. It is good we have a committee, whether a committee or a task force, but again, one must be very skeptical about 14-day period within which it is supposed to report. It takes at least time to understand the problem and then to be able to make a comprehensive report. Otherwise, we could as well deal with the issues affecting us in an ad hoc way and simply say, let's enforce the law and let's ensure that we do proper licensing. Otherwise, I think we will be back to square one and we will repeat the game of musical chairs that we have had over the years.
Okay, Benson Ocheng, an environmental lawyer, Dr. Isaac Kalu is the chair of the Kenya Water Towers Agency and a member of that task force team that has 14 days to report back to the Cabinet Secretary. We're today talking about our forest cover, the situation of drought that we're facing in the country, which was declared a national disaster by President Uhuru Kenyatta last year. But also, you know this, you're feeling the heat. Isn't that what we're all talking about in the country right now? The heat wave that's currently ongoing. So this is definitely an issue that we can all relate to. That's why it is our big story tonight. And we'll be right back to talk about some of those root causes, the systemic failures, and what we need to do going forward. We'll be talking solutions when we return.